Hello, everyone. Welcome. Can anyone hear us? We've got a chat on the right-hand side. Could do with a yes, thumbs up. Amazing. Thanks, Sophie.
Oh, good.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Quite a few people coming through. Hello. Thanks very much. Brilliant. Super. Lots of you here. Okay. Thank you. Welcome. My name is Alexandra. I take care of operations at Prolific North. And thanks so much to all of you for joining us on our first ever webinar. Yay! So if you like this type of format, do let us know what sorts of other topics you would like covered. Would like to have a go at that. If anyone struggles with sort of the quality of the video, the quality of the sound, refresh your browser for those that can't actually hear me. So I've just put it in the chat. Make use of the chat over there to ask your questions, give us your insights. I have a bit of an echo. Okay. Thanks, James. Brilliant. Just for those that will ask, there will be a recording made available of this webinar later on today, and you will get that on your email. So in case you need to pop out for any sort of calls or anything like that, you can still catch up with the content. Brilliant. I think most people are online now. So I'd like to say welcome to Jane and Rebecca. Thanks so much for joining us today to talk about how to handle your PR in the midst of COVID-19. So over to you guys.
Thank you, Alexandra. So I hope everyone's got a cup of tea or coffee and some biscuits and is comfortable, and we'll make a start. So as Alexandra said, we're going to be talking about how to handle your PR in the midst of COVID-19. So first of all, if you are having any technical issues, then please just refresh your browser, and if that doesn't work, then just kind of post any problems into the chat, and Alexandra will see how she can help you. So this is kind of what the session's going to cover. Firstly, we're going to look at the impact of COVID-19 on the press and how PRs can respond. And then the content that journalists actually need right now and why, and how brands can gain coverage. And we'll show some examples of some good coverage and then some examples of brands kind of just missing the mark a little bit. And then we'll have a look at tools to help you kind of think more creatively and resourcefully to help you generate ideas for topics too. And then last, we'll have a look at kind of how to be sensitive with your tone and messaging during this situation. And then at the end, there'll be a chance for everyone to ask us any questions. We don't pretend to have all the answers, but we'll have a very good go at answering anything. And we're quite happy to kind of share our knowledge and experiences to date. So speaking today is myself. I'm Jane Hunt. I'm the co-founder of JBH, the content agency. And then I have my colleague, Rebecca Moss, who's the digital PR director.
Good morning, guys. Yes, I'm digital PR director at JBH North, and I look after the digital PR experts on my team to cover digital PR for a range of clients in a range of sectors, including health, food, travel, all sorts of things. So yeah, hopefully we can give you some tips and advice on how to handle things at the moment.
So just a little bit about JBH. We fuse traditional PR with link acquisition, and that means we combine kind of generating, obviously, traditional PR coverage with gaining links in order to support SEO teams in order to boost their visibility in search. So we kind of have two objectives when we do our PR. We're experts in data-led campaigns, and I say this because I think it's really relevant at the moment, because everything we do with our clients is kind of thought leadership, and the aim of that is to build credibility with journalists and also with customers. So any data we can supply to journalists really helps add credibility towards our client and a situation, and helps us make kind of content timely too. So most of our clients are lifestyle brands, and so most of our content and campaigns are all kind of lifestyle based. So that's kind of what we're going to be kind of looking at today. So why are we talking to you today about how to handle your PR at the moment? And just like kind of PR teams all over the country, when COVID-19 kind of first hit, we had to really think about our strategy for all our clients, how we were kind of conducting our campaigns, the topics, angles, everything kind of involved, and the timing. So when our campaigns were going out and how to handle it. So everyone's experienced this all over the country. We're by no means kind of an exception, but we are going to share with you kind of how we reacted and responded. So what did we actually do? And Rebecca's going to tell you a bit about how we responded.
So there's a few different things that we did when we realised that everything was going to change for us. We took a step back, took a deep breath and paused all of our campaigns, because there was no point just keep hammering out our campaigns as if nothing had happened. We had a moment to breathe and we took stock of the situation. We then consulted with our clients and told them what we were going to do, so what campaigns we're going to pause and how we were going to adapt the tone and angle of all these other campaigns to try and make them a better fit for what journalists were looking for at the moment. We also jumped on opportunities that we saw on things like Journo Request and Harrow. We also looked at what was trending on Twitter as well to see if we could position our clients to comment on those types of things. So, for example, the national parks a couple of weeks ago were saying they were going to offer all free entry to people. Things like banana bread, everyone's apparently baking banana bread on Twitter. And even things like dogs on conference calls, silly little things like that. We're kind of all over Twitter, and they were things that our clients specifically were able to comment on. Also, we had a look at what the editors were saying on Twitter and took this advice on board, as well as looking at other webinars that were being put out there at the moment, and kind of take that information on board and kind of fold it into our campaigns. And most importantly, we started thinking less like PRs and a little bit more like journalists and reporters.
So what impact has COVID-19 had on the press? So I think the most important thing is that the press now need more content than ever, because there's more people consuming it than ever before. And if you think about it, we've got the whole country on lockdown. It's not just the whole country. I think about the third of the population of the world is on lockdown at the moment. So you've got publications all over the world having more eyeballs and more views than ever before. And I couldn't find like a UK stat on this, but I did find a stat in the US, and that said that page views were up on major publications by 30%. So that will impact how much content journalists need and the opportunities too. So some journalists in worst hit sectors have really had to change their tactics and fill gaps. And we've included a couple of the sectors below that have been significantly hit. For example, we've got sport. Obviously, most of the big sporting events have been cancelled. So now all those sport publications have to fill those major gaps with content. And then travel and leisure, we can't go anywhere, we can't eat anywhere, etc. So you've got travel and leisure journalists crying out for content too, because they can't talk about where you should go right now, they can't promote specific restaurants and things. So everyone's kind of in the same boat, but I think there are some sectors that have been a lot worse hit. And just to kind of emphasize this point, travel journalists have had to pivot from promoting attractions and destinations to now looking at content for 2021, dream holidays and providing escapism. And if you think about it, yes, journalists will want corona-related stories right now, but they don't want to cover it 24/7. So we all need some escapism. So we do need to still be thinking about holidays in the future, and kind of researching and planning where we can go when we're not in lockdown and the travel ban is lifted. So how can PRs respond? So first of all, you can keep sending your pictures. We've got journalists all over Twitter saying that they need your pictures, keep them coming in. And this is great for PRs to hear. Rather than them complaining about how many emails are in their inboxes, they want them. They want your pictures. They want your stories to keep coming in. And they also want to know about the situation. So they want to know how the virus is impacting brands and consumers. So what can you tell them about how the virus is impacting your brand, your customers, your staff? They want to hear these stories because they want to kind of offer a real portrayal of what's going on. And then I think most importantly, don't hide from it and pretend it's not happening. I think that's the worst thing that brands can do. So you need to make sure your pitches are realistic to the national situation, as I think we all know now that lockdown is going to continue for a long while more. So it's not just another week or so. So we really need to think about how our messaging kind of reflects that.
I think that's a really important point, Jane, about not hiding from it. You might get some brands that you're working with or brands that you're working for that are maybe going, oh, we should maybe just keep quiet during this time. I'd really, really advise against that and try and kind of give them some ideas and kind of handhold them through the situation, because that's what we're here for. That's what they pay us for. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Thank you. So what content do editors want right now? So either the last week or the week before, we did a webinar with some travel journalists, and they revealed what pitches and content they really want. And while this is just related to travel, I think this reflects what all journalists need right now. So it's worth kind of listening to for every kind of brand, no matter what sector you're in. So firstly, they wanted some humor. They wanted some quirky content. Everyone kind of needs their morale boosting at the moment. So don't be afraid to offer something humorous or a little bit quirky or weird or whatever it might be. We need those kind of different stories. And again, they want something positive. We can't all be talking about something negative all the time. We just can't cope with that. So keep sending them positive stories too. And they said they wanted to be able to offer useful tips during this time and hacks. So what does your brand have to offer when it comes to kind of offering any expertise, any little tips, hacks? What expertise do you have internally that you can be sharing right now? And also trends for 2021. Obviously, they can't be talking about kind of travel trends right now because that would be ridiculous, but they can be thinking about what trends might be happening next year and where we all might want to go then. And then lastly, escapism. I've already mentioned this, but I think we're going to need more and more escapism as this kind of continues. So whatever stories you have that kind of aid to that or can offer. And they said that PRs need to be a bit more creative with what they're sending. So PRs need to think outside the box. And this can be difficult to do sometimes, especially when maybe you're in quite a kind of strict sector, or you're not used to kind of thinking a bit more creatively about content. But there are many things you can do, and we've got some tools that we'll refer to later on that help you think about what you can offer that is going to be useful right now. And as Rebecca mentioned earlier, think like a journalist. So stop thinking about what you need to promote for your brand, but actually what journalists want to hear about. And it will be much easier to generate coverage once you think that way around. And then we've got some examples. So if you can't promote a hotel stay at the moment, can you be pitching other sectors instead? Can you pitch room decor to interior design publications, for example? Or if you can't send anyone anywhere, can you provide them with a virtual experience? And virtual experiences are really big and topical at the moment, and we've had some success with them too. So be thinking about what virtual experiences you can offer.
I think as well with the virtual experience, look what Chester Zoo did with their content recently this week by doing a virtual walk around the zoo. You know, that went everywhere. Everybody was talking about it. So if you work for a huge brand that could do something like that, then why not take a leaf out of their book, really?
And then if people can't get hold of food essentials that they might need, but they still want to make nice recipes, what items can they get hold of that they can swap out instead? So always be thinking about alternatives if people are struggling to get hold of things. Really, it's just about thinking about how your brand expertise can lend itself during this time and how you can show brand purpose. And I think that's what will best engage and inspire people at the moment. And journalists want to hear about the impact of COVID-19. I've always I've already mentioned this, but I think it's really important to kind of reiterate that journalists want to hear how this situation is impacting on brands, so how it's affecting demand, how it's affecting your staff, and how any brands are adapting. So if you've made different products, if you're selling your products in a different way, maybe you weren't online before, but now you're purely online, they want to hear about all these things. So what do consumers think? And I thought it was important to put this in because when I was looking around yesterday, I found that Kantar have just released a study and it's got some important points for all brands, not just PRs, but what you should be thinking about within your marketing strategy right now. So I've just kind of picked out a few of the stats involved. So 78% of consumers believe brands should help them in their daily lives. And this points again to providing really useful content. And almost 80% believe employee health should be a key priority. So if you're a brand that is really doing a lot to put your employees first, then tell journalists about it. And 45% want to see companies protect the supply of services and products. So this might be ahead of doing other things. And then more than 40% want to see companies making donations of products such as hand sanitizers or face masks. So if you are doing anything charitable and you are kind of helping out nurses or key workers in any way, again, make sure you're pitching those stories and really highlighting that fact. And then key for me is only 30% want to see brands offering discounts and promotions. And I'm going to cover this later on, but think really carefully about just sending out loads of discounts and promotions. I don't want to say in desperation at the moment, but that's what it might be, because I think in the long run, it'll have a negative impact. If you are going to do it, do it sparingly, but don't make it your key messaging. So now I'm going to hand over to Rebecca, who's going to talk about some kind of reactive campaigns that we've been working on.
So based on all the things we've spoken about in the previous conversation, really, about how do we put these into practice. So the first one I wanted to run through was this campaign we ran at the start of March for Ring Central. So this is a brand that's similar to Skype and Zoom in the fact that they offer video calls and chats. So what we did was we looked at the number of remote working jobs using Indeed to reveal like where in the UK and around the world was the most geared up for remote working already. So we launched this just as kind of Boris was asking us all to start working from home. So this one really was a combination of well-timed and relevant content because we already had this campaign in the works anyway. It was just changing how we pitched the story rather than being about the employee. It was more about the employers that were setting up our best place to set up. The next one we've got here is social distancing, 5 virtual tours to check out during self-isolation. So similar to what Chester Zoo were doing, we took a leaf out of their book, as I said before, and we put a big listicle together of all the different museums and brands that were doing virtual tours around their like mosques and churches and things like that, so that if you're kind of homeschooling or you're kind of sat there just thinking what else can I do instead of watching Netflix, you can take yourself on a tour when you can't actually be there for yourself. On to the next one, thank you. Moving on to another couple of campaigns that we ran. So really quick reactive ones here for a food-based brand. We saw that everyone was talking about baking banana bread. People were going, God, if I see another banana bread recipe on Twitter, I'm going to go mad. So I thought, right, here we go. We've got a recipe on the website for banana bread. Let's pitch this out and see who picks it up. So then again, the Metro said that, yeah, they'd love to feature a banana bread if we could figure out what the substitutes were for some of the ingredients if you didn't have them in your cupboard. So that was another way that we kind of got buy-in from publications just by using some content we already had on the website. And again, hooking back onto the Chester Zoo thing for our virtual tours. And the last one, a little bit different. Did you know that people are actually getting engaged during lockdown? I had no idea. Neither did we. So we started seeing proposals popping up all over Instagram. We started seeing them on TikTok. People were proposing to each other in their own homes. So what we did was we took a note of all these different proposals that we were seeing on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, just kept a note of them just for future reference, and then got our client Purely Diamonds, who are an engagement ring company, to put some tips together around proposing at home. So putting all that content together meant that we could go out to all the lifestyle publications at this time with something that was quite lighthearted and uplifting. So yeah, that was quite a nice one to go out with. So it was just using what we already had and what was already been popular online to create content that was going to kind of feed the journalists at this time, I guess.
And then we've got some, sorry, Rebecca, and then we've got some examples of brands kind of gaining some positive coverage. So these are a couple of stories I found about some big brands that are actually repurposing their factories to actually make kind of equipment and clothing to actually support the NHS and PPE. So we've got fashion brands like Prada, Armani, Gap, H&M, all using their factories to create PPE clothing. And then obviously we've got Dyson making tens of thousands of ventilators for the NHS. So again, if you are kind of diversifying or adapting what you're producing in order to help fight coronavirus, then do tell journalists what you're doing and how. And then this is a really nice positive story, and I thought this was really well aligned. So we've got Allbirds, who are gifting free shoes to 2,000 NHS workers. And these shoes are the most comfortable shoes you can buy. And so it's the perfect kind of target audience for them to get these worn by nurses and doctors, etc., who are on their feet all day. And obviously by gifting them, that generates some really good charitable PR for them too. And then we've got Evans Cycles. So Evans Cycles are not seen as essential, so had to shut down. But what they have done is they've created a lot of content in order for people to fix their bikes, do up their bikes, etc. at home. And then lastly, we've got Oatly, who just wanted to tell their customers that you can now get hold of Oatly kind of online as well. So this isn't a PR message as such, but just to show that you can still offer kind of useful advice while still promoting your products. And then we've got some examples of brands that are, slightly missing the mark. So the first one is I Saw It First, and there are a few fast fashion examples here. And I Saw It First, thought it was a good idea to send out hand sanitizer with each of their sales. And obviously someone on Twitter pointed out that this was a terrible idea, since all hand sanitizer should be going to nurses right now, not being sent to their customers at home. And then we've got Fat Face, and Fat Face were trying to kind of offer useful tips while still kind of discounting and promoting their kind of clothing at the same time. So as someone else on Twitter pointed out, this kind of fell flat and didn't kind of look like something that was actually useful content. And then again, we've got a couple of fast fashion examples. So I think we've got Boohoo here, who are promoting their buy now, pay later initiative. And I think with what's going on at the moment, and obviously people being made redundant and people being furloughed and the people being insecure about whether they are going to have a job in the coming kind of months, I think it's really poor to be offering any kind of buy now, pay later unless you're a proper kind of financial institution. So I think brands should avoid from doing anything like this at the moment. And then we've got Cotswold Outdoors, and I was having a look at kind of people's social media to see what they were doing on there, and they were kind of putting up a mix of kind of useful content, sharing advice, with also kind of product discount-led posts too. And as you can see on the left, the useful advice was getting so much more engagement than the discounted promotions. So I just think it's something to remember that at the moment, you will get better engagement by being seen to be useful rather than just consistently offering discounts.
And I think when you see those two side by side, it really kind of grates against each other, because you've got the one hand saying, stay inside, don't go outside, don't do anything, stay at home to save lives, that kind of thing. Yeah. And on the other side, you've got, 20% off the North Face. So what do you do with the North Face stuff you out to go outside? So it just feels like it was completely disproportionate in the way that it was being put together really on their social feed.
Definitely. And then lastly, we've got the Metro reporting about Gordon Ramsay promoting a new YouTube series after laying off 500 staff due to the coronavirus crisis. So obviously this was bad timing, but also if you are going to be laying off anyone or furloughing anyone or having any negative impact on your employees, then think really hard about what you're promoting and why, and just make sure you think through the scenarios of what could go wrong and how the press could interpret that. So Rebecca's going to share some tips on how you can be creative and resourceful if you can't do a lot of promotion and discounting at the moment.
Thank you. So I guess it's all well and good us showing off about the coverage we've achieved as a result of this reactive approach, but I did want to share with you how we came up with these ideas in the first place. So if you're struggling to know what to pitch and why to pitch it and where to pitch it, you can start by doing some research around your brand using some of these tools that we've got here. So we've got Answer the Public, Google Trends, Keywords Everywhere, and Google Analytics. So I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to go through the three key free ones that we've got there. So I've written a blog post about it actually on the JBH site, which we'll share a link to later in the chat. And I think Alexandra's going to share that as well. So you can have a look and see kind of how we use those tools to come up with these ideas. So first up, Answer the Public. So what you do with this is you simply put a search term in the box and it tells you all about what everyone else is searching for around any topic at all. So for example, if you're a fitness brand like a gym or even an athleisure fashion brand, if you typed in something like indoor workout, it'll show you other topics that are commonly asked around this. So the ones that kind of stuck out for me were things like indoor workouts that burn the most calories, how to work out at home if you haven't got hardly any space, or even how to involve your kids in your daily workout. So all that kind of stuff. If you're one of those gym or athleisure fashion brands, you could quite easily create content around that if you had the expertise in-house with you there. Just moving on to Google Trends. So we've seen some really, really interesting and quite funny examples of things that are spiking at the moment. So I've put an example here of toilet paper alternative. This is just to kind of show what people were searching for kind of at the start of March. Other things that we've seen spikes in search for are things like indoor bikes. So maybe people are dusting off their indoor bikes and stop using them as coat hangers and hopping back on them because they can't go out as much to exercise, can't go to the gym. Another one that we found was, do I need to wash fresh food? So I don't know about you, if people are washing their food when they come back from the supermarket. I don't know. I'm not doing that. But people are actually searching for tips around that, if they need to do it or not. How careful do they need to be? And things like how to make pasta from scratch as well. We've seen a lot of content around making pasta from scratch and people doing Instagram lives and things. So you can see just from these small idea stems, you can grow into something. These idea stems can grow into something that you can pitch in no time at all, just by using what you've already got kind of in your own store cupboard, really. The next one on the list, yeah, thanks Jane, is Keywords Everywhere. So this is a really cool browser extension that I just have kind of ticking away in the background. Every time that you do a Google search, what Keywords Everywhere does, it puts a list of related searches next to your search itself. So say, for example, I've just taken, do I need to wash vegetables before cooking them? And then there were some other topics down the side that were showing things like washing lettuce with vinegar. Do you need to wash grapes before eating them? So these are all related things that people were also worried about, that we could potentially, if we were a food brand or someone with expertise in that sector, we could create content around and pitch that out to the press. So again, we knew that in Google Trends that washing fruit when you get back from the supermarket was a trend that people were searching. So using that information and finding out what else people were searching for is a great tip if you're not kind of sure what content to be creating at this time. And there's also things that you can do with Google Analytics too, which I go through in the blog post. So yeah, give that a click and have a look. Back over to Jane now, who's going to tell us a little bit more about how to position your brand sensitively at this time once you've got all your ideas.
So apologies if this kind of seems like common sense, and most of it is common sense, but I think it's just kind of worth reiterating. I think all brands should be seen to add value at the moment, and that's where kind of any strategy and messaging should be. I think you've got plenty of time to promote, but the brands that will come out of this the strongest will be the ones that are seen to be useful rather than just chucking out promotion and discount after discount. So really focus on discovering what useful advice you can offer, who you've got internally to add expertise, to add quotes to things, and how you can align, obviously, your advice with your products. And then most importantly, really consider the timings. So because the situation is changing so quickly at the moment, it might be that one day you have a campaign and the next day you can't use that campaign anymore. And we were in that position at the beginning of the week, and we had a campaign that wasn't going anywhere. We looked back at it and thought, this isn't the time to be talking about this topic. It's not on people's radars at the moment. It's not important to people. So let's kind of shift the focus of it and concentrate on something else instead. So we could still kind of repurpose it, but we couldn't go out with our original angle. So I think you need to consider the timings really carefully. And if you do have a good idea, be prepared to get that idea out in a day or two, kind of max. Otherwise, someone else will take that opportunity. And be prepared to postpone if need be, or to keep tweaking until you feel that it is right in order to send it out. And align your message with the UK. So I've already mentioned this, but we need to make sure that all the messaging is kind of realistic and really reflects current lifestyles. So there's no point talking about things that don't matter to people at the moment, because people's jobs matter, people's health matters, and a lot of other things will just fall to the wayside. So really think about what our current lifestyles look like, what we can and can't do, and make sure your messaging reflects that. And then what can go wrong? And I know as PRs, we think about what can go wrong anyway, but just spend some extra time considering it. Really look at your tone of voice. Think about if it could be a bit off, if what you're saying could be misinterpreted, and really consider how people might react negatively and then tweak it. And if you're in any doubt, just check what people are saying about the topic on Twitter, because then you see what the sentiment is towards the topic, and then you can gauge it from there. So just to kind of finish up and just kind of go over the key takeaways. Really, what you should take from this is just keep pitching. Journalists really need you at the moment, so don't be afraid to pitch things. Obviously, please be considered, but just keep sending all your stories to journalists, because they really need as much content as they can get. Secondly, be prepared to be really reactive and to respond as quickly as you can. And this might mean that you have to gather the whole team together, or the whole, from top down, make sure everyone is aware of the messaging, everyone's agreed it, so you can be seen to respond quickly to opportunities. And then how can you add value to the conversation? And this is the most important thing. So everybody has expertise that they can offer. It's just about what expertise aligns right now, what topics you can cover. And when we were kind of putting this webinar together, we were searching for examples of brands kind of gaining really good coverage and, offering useful tips. And there weren't that many brands doing it. So there's all these opportunities for people to jump on topics related to their brands and their products, and to offer some really good advice. And then share the impact of COVID-19 on your business. And obviously I understand you may not want to share any kind of negative impacts, but you may have positive things that are happening as a result. You may have been able to diversify. You may be now offering your product services online and you weren't before, or you may have taken everything online. So really think about what you can offer journalists in terms of the impact of COVID-19 and how they could make a story out of it, or you could be part of a roundup. And then obviously think about making sure your messages are realistic. So just ensure they match the tone of the UK and how everybody kind of feels about the situation. And lastly, we all need some positivity right now. So there are loads of opportunities. So please take those opportunities, run with them. And and I think the brands that do that keep generating PR, keep putting messages and stories out there, they will come out of that strongest. So I hope this has been really useful and that you've taken something from this. Again, we will share the resources mentioned, obviously during the chat or after the webinar. And we look forward to any comments and also any questions. So please feel free to ask away and we'll do our best to answer them.
Jane, we've already got a question from Sam. And the question is, do you have any tips on how to best build and nurture relationships with journalists?
That's a very good question, and I will hand over to Rebecca to answer that one.
So this is a question that we get asked a lot, and I think in terms of nurturing relationships with journalists, it happens over time. So I wouldn't expect to be nurturing a relationship in a week, for example. So, but this is obviously a great time to start with those relationships. So if you're sending them useful content, as we described before, they will look to you again and again for additional content when they need you in the future. So not just during like the COVID-19 stuff, they will want to speak to you in the future as well, because they'll know that you represent that brand. I mean, the golden goose at this point, I think, is to get journalists coming to you asking for comments, coming to you asking for content, because they see you as, a reliable source of that information. So use this time as a time to start nurturing those relationships if you don't have them already. So it's a great time to start giving them content, so they trust you and they know that they're going to get a timely response from you. So it's just using those really good media relations skills that you already have, and kind of making the journalist kind of be able to rely on you, I guess, at this point. I hope that answers your question, Sam.
Definitely. So we've got another one here. How regularly do you think we should be posting content?
How regularly do you think we should be posting content? Do you mean in terms of pitching to journalists or on your website?
I think it possibly could be both. So posting content kind of on social media, and maybe how often, maybe too often for pitching journalists with stories. I'll maybe answer both those questions.
I think I'm probably best placed to answer the one about pitching journalists. So I think if you're going to be pitching something every single day to them, it needs to be super, super useful. So it might be that you have a campaign that you're running. So for example, if I talk about the proposals content that we did earlier on, we talked about it before with the proposals that we'd seen during the pandemic. So say, for example, you've got that piece of content ready to go and you've sent it out to all the journalists. If you then had another piece of content that was maybe about weddings that had happened during the pandemic, you could maybe send that out on a different day, maybe leave a day in between it. So I don't think you're going to annoy anybody by sending them content day after day, but just be mindful that if they've not come back to you straight away, or they've not come back to you within a day's time, it might not be quite right for them and they might be super busy. So it's kind of trying to read the room, really, I think, at this point. And if you don't have much luck, try somebody else. And again, just another word on kind of exclusives and things. If you've offered somebody an exclusive, don't send it to anybody else, because I think a lot of us have fallen foul of that in the past as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. So we've got a really nice question here, and it is, any advice on how to turn around campaigns in one day?
Just do it quick. Just simplify them. Dial it back. If you don't need a certain aspect of data, if you don't need a certain thing from your client, if you don't need to create any new content, then don't do it. If you can manage with what you've got already, then manage with what you've got already. If you can use something you've already got on the website, a piece of content, and you can reposition it and repurpose it for use for outreach, then go ahead and do that. The least extra work that you have to do will mean that you get that content out quicker. So it's just been about really, really strict with your time, really strict with about what you put into that content, and kind of, I'm going to say scraping the barrel, then I don't think scraping the barrel is the right word. I think it's more just using what you've got and making the best out of it in a situation like this.
Thank you. Another one here. Do you think it's best to stick to PR pitching times as usual during this time, or is there a new best time to pitch?
We've had success pitching in the afternoon, pitching in the morning, pitching on a Friday afternoon. I don't think the regular rules are applying at the moment. For example, if you're going out to maybe audience writers or trends writers, which we do quite a lot, they're looking for content all day, every day. But again, the regular rules apply. If you can get your pitches out before 8 o'clock when everyone goes into their editors' meetings. I mean, they might be on Zoom or they might be on Skype at the moment, but if you can get that content in before then, you're more likely to get someone to come back to you because they've had the opportunity to speak to their editor about the idea.
Okay, thank you. I've got so many questions, so I'll do my best to try and get through them all. I've got one here from Abby. Are you finding that the reactive campaigns are landing more coverage than the more traditional PR campaign formats, even if they are more light-hearted or useful?
I think it depends on topic, it depends on vertical, and it depends on journalist. I think in our specific sectors, things like lifestyle, food, hospitality, and things like that, travel, for example, the more light-hearted stuff is landing more frequently, just purely because of what people are searching for at the moment, specifically with the trends and audience writers. As you can see, if you're looking in Google Trends, you can see that, you know, there's a huge increase in people looking for light-hearted content. So, you know, use that as kind of intel and start pitching those campaigns. In terms of traditional stuff, take a look at your campaign, take a step back and see if there's actually any way that you can reposition that traditional campaign into something that is a bit more of the moment. Is that okay?
Okay, so we've got one from an agency here, and it's, can you give some tips on building your agency's brand PR?
I think that's one for you, Jane.
My advice would just be, again, it's the same advice that I would give any brands. I think agencies need to be as useful as possible at the moment, hence why we're doing this free webinar. So we could have charged for it, but I didn't think that was appropriate. And I think everybody needs the most help they can get. But in times like this, you know, even agencies need to be still talking about what they do. We still need sales, etc. too. But I think we also not have a responsibility, but can also be sharing as much knowledge as possible. And I think it's building credibility that way that will help kind of in the long term too. So I hope that kind of answers the question and that helps. So just create more content, you know, share expertise. I think that's the best that we can do at the moment.
And I think as well, just to add to that, Jane, if you're, instead of building your kind of agency PR, if you're talking to the clients that you already have and getting them to kind of trust you a little bit more during this time, so you can have the freedom to go out and do those more reactive campaigns, you know, give them a ring and just say, look, are you okay? What's happening over there? Do you need our help? Is there anything we can do to support you at this time? Lean on us if you need anything. So just be that kind of open ear. You know, you're not sat in the room with them. They can kind of use you as a sounding board for anything that ideas that they do have in mind. And you might actually come up with some ideas together, which is always a great thing as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you. So we've got a question here about the sports industry. So do you have any tips for the sports industry? We are transferring traffic to other brands, but how to save people talking about the sport in current times? So I guess kind of what could we be covering on behalf of the sports industry at the moment?
I think sports actually quite a difficult one, because I'm guessing a lot of sports writers will be looking for things to write. So again, the market's there if you were going to be pitching sport type content. It may be looking back at what's happened in the past. So I've seen, for example, on Twitter recently, people talking about showing the London 2012 Olympics again, because if you remember in the opening ceremony, there was a big tribute to the NHS. So I guess if you looked at maybe something that's between sport and health, that might be a good kind of road to go down. I think it really depends on kind of what type of sport you're talking about. I'm guessing, you know, because talking about Wimbledon being cancelled, is there any way you could look at the last time Wimbledon was cancelled? I don't know, looking at things that have happened in the past and making them more current, and even looking at what could potentially happen in the future. So if Wimbledon does get cancelled, what will it be replaced with? Will they show reruns of matches, tennis matches from the past? You know, John McEnroe shouting at the umpire, that kind of thing. So I'm guessing there's loads of things you can do there just by looking at what's happened in the past and giving sports journalists that content that they're craving, but also using stuff that you've already got kind of sat there ready to go.
Definitely. And I also saw on Twitter this morning that there was an Olympic swimmer training in the back garden in a pool by tying a rope to their waist around a tree. So it'd be also interesting to hear about what kind of sports people are doing at home to keep fit, and how they're kind of managing their fitness levels, etc. Because that's the kind of content that journalists and consumers would love to hear about, especially if there's video and kind of images to go with it. So you could be looking at sportsmen and women on kind of Twitter, Instagram, just to see kind of what they're doing while they're on lockdown. What other questions do we have? So we've got a finance-based one. So it's easier for lifestyle brands to change direction in a campaign, but would you have the same advice for finance mortgage brands?
I probably wouldn't say go down the light and fluffy route for this one, but what advice can someone within that brand give? So if there's somebody who's a financial expert or a mortgage broker within the business that might be able to give some comments or quotes or anything like that that a journalist could maybe use within another article. So what I would probably look to do at that point is to use the expert within your business and pitch those people out as like thought leaders and expert commentary, just so that journalists know to come to you if they need a quick comment or they need something really quick to use within an article. So for example, you've got a mortgage broker there talking about mortgage payment holidays, for example. So if a journalist is struggling to find someone to comment on that or give like not even a hot take, it would be more kind of just some really sound advice and tips. That would be another great way of using what you've got already in the bank, I suppose, pun intended, and go out with journalists with that. So there's loads of things you can do that it doesn't have to be light and fluffy. It can be kind of advice-based stuff. I hope that kind of covers it.
Hopefully. We're at 45 minutes now. Shall I continue, Alexandra, or do you want me to kind of wrap things up?
Maybe one other question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we've got a question here. Do you have any tips on how to highlight the good our clients are doing without appearing like we're just doing it for publicity? So that's a good question.
Oh, okay. I think it would be to do with adding insight into why you're doing what you're doing. So say, for example, let's take Brewdog and their hand sanitizer. So let's not beat around the bush. I think they are doing that as a brand exercise. I think they are doing that to get in the press, which is great. It's for good. But I think as long as you're doing something that actually is going to make a difference to key workers and nurses and things like that around the country, I don't think you need to worry too much about it being a bit self-serving. It's all about the pitch. It's all about the positioning. So, for example, if you're talking about Brewdog, they could talk about how they've managed to change their machinery within the factories to create that hand sanitizer. How they've actually gone about sourcing all the ingredients to do that, and what difference it's actually made to their production process. So, there are things that you can do that's a bit more informative. That could, even a video of them making the hand sanitizer. So, there's lots of different things you can do that isn't just about, hey, look at me, look how charitable we are.
Brilliant.
Cool, thank you. So we've got time for one more question. So I've got one here about kind of healthcare. So what would you do for clients whose entire business is based around the healthcare system? So news information about the healthcare system may be insensitive right now. What can we do instead?
In terms of like criticism around the healthcare industry and things like that?
I wouldn't say so much criticism. Maybe just not. Oh, it's a tricky one, but I thought it was an interesting question. So maybe kind of what can healthcare companies be talking about at the moment without seeming insensitive?
I think it would be more around, again, thought leadership. So the same kind of advice that we were giving to the finance-led question. So if you have someone within your business that is an expert on maybe face masks or even kind of PPE, talking about how people with maybe 3D printers could help out. I've seen some tweets floating around on Twitter about that. People with 3D printers are starting to print out, is it like the masks that go over the nurses' eyes and things? So if you're a healthcare brand that does have, that is doing things like that, then that is the type of thing you should be speaking about. Again, if you've got experts in PPE clothing, they will be in high demand, I imagine, for journalists writing content around those things. So think about the expertise that you've got in-house. Think about the type of knowledge that you have that nobody else will have that you can put out there.
Thanks a lot, Jen and Rebecca, for joining us today and sharing their wisdom with us. Thanks to those who are still watching us. As mentioned before, this recording will be made available to you just later today via emails. So unfortunately that's all we've got time for today. But do let us know what other topics you'd like webinars on our channels, on the Prolific North channels. And have a lovely day ahead. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.